Welcome to Medical Malfunction, and today we're going to talk about dates. Not the kind that are fun. These are the kind you have to pay attention to. And dates come in all forms and fashions on your forms and your forms, just all these forms. So I want to talk on a few examples. I'll give you having to do with COBRA, having to do with authorizations, having to do with FMLA, having to do with referrals even. Of course, you know some of the things you usually have to keep up with, like you got to refill your medications, you're paying attention to things like that. Pay attention to when your medication refills are going to run out, things like that. Of course, those are pretty basic. But when it comes to paperwork, there's all kinds of, oh gosh, when the referral was written, it actually usually has an expiration date. Sometimes they're 30 days, sometimes they're a year. So you have to pay attention if you're getting a referral done to make sure that you call and either set up the appointment or get the appointment scheduled within whatever the time frame is. I also want to talk about COBRA for a second because most people are familiar with COBRA as the health insurance that's sort of that bridge that covers you, say if you get laid off or you're changing jobs voluntarily, things like that. But COBRA is important for one particular reason, and I'm going to give you a good example right here that I experienced myself. So COBRA, like I said, it bridges that coverage between, when you're, without health insurance, because again, in America, it's usually attached to your job. But COBRA does something else that a lot of people don't think about. It continues your coverage for pre-existing conditions. Pre-existing conditions is something that we talk a lot about. It was a big part of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. We were supposed to do away with pre-existing conditions. And usually what happens is whether you start a new job or a new health insurance coverage, you basically have 1 year where any pre-existing coverage does not exist. They can basically not treat your coverage for a year. So I'm a great example. In the case of mine, like if I were to have to change plans right now, I would have to do a year without any coverage. Well, that would be bad because I'm right in the middle. Well, not right in the middle. I'm at a different point, but of being treated for breast cancer. Well, that would be terrible, right? So if I were to COBRA, let's say I were to have to COBRA. Well, here's an example of one time where I had to COBRA. I was voluntarily changing jobs. And so I left my job on a Friday, started my new job on a Monday. I didn't take any time off or anything like that, but I was not covered on a health plan on Saturday and Sunday, that weekend between the two jobs. Well, guess what? If I wanted to have any pre-existing coverage, any conditions covered, I had to COBRA for that one weekend. It was 2 days. It cost me $300. But I realized it and I went, oh, you know what? Even though nothing happened that weekend, I already knew nothing happened that weekend, but I also knew just in case there was any question ever, I did that COBRA coverage. So I paid out of my own pocket, and of course you can use your FSA, your HSA, try to come up like that. Because that was expensive. That COBRA is very expensive, but you have to pay attention to things like that and think about dates like that. When it comes to ensuring that you've got yourself bridged for care, because otherwise you could be surprised. They would say, oh, did you know that you had this gap in coverage? And then you could get denied, say if you have diabetes and you're on insulin, that 2 days for the gap in coverage could cost you for the whole next year, and you could have to come up out of pocket for all of your diabetes care because you have that 1 year waiting period where you're not going to have that pre-existing condition covered. Just the types of things that, would be good to know, and you got to be mindful about whether it's voluntary, not voluntary. Those little gaps in coverage are very important when it comes to healthcare. So always pay attention to first dates, last dates, pay attention. And sometimes, by the way, you can negotiate that with your employer, whether you're voluntarily separating or not. You can make sure that, especially if you're going somewhere else, you can negotiate those terms with your employer. So definitely ask. You can go to your HR benefits person and say, hey, I need to, negotiate the term ending dates because I've got to bridge this coverage, due to a condition, blah, blah, blah. So those things are important to keep in mind. They're an option. So pay attention to first dates and last dates. Same with prior authorizations as well. If you have prior authorizations for, say, you've got a x-ray that you've got to get done. Well, your prior authorizations that have come through your health insurance coverage may only be good for 30 days, may be good for 60 days. So make sure you get that x-ray done or test done or whatever you've got to get done before the authorization expires, or you might have to get it authorized all over again. So always pay attention when you've got paperwork done. Otherwise, you have to jump through the hoops all over again. And pay attention when you've got coverage that you've got to bridge. You never let there be a gap, even if you have to come out of pocket for a little bit. Either try to make sure that you've done that coverage, even if you can do it retroactively, by the way. If you notice it after the fact, you can go back and do it. Or if you know that it's coming up before the fact, coordinate it with your own company's benefits coordinator, the one that you're currently working for, because obviously the new company, they're not likely going to give you any benefits before you actually start on your first day. That's just not something that they do, because that's a liability for them. But at your existing company, they might be able to post date it. It is possible. It does happen sometimes. Not as likely, but you know, there's still that COBRA option. That's what it's there for, is to bridge that gap for you. So always pay attention to your dates. And even if it costs you a little bit extra, be mindful of it, because it could save you a lot in the long run. So there you go, first dates and last dates, things to look for. Make sure you get your stuff done and make sure your coverage is bridged, even if it seems a little expensive, worth it in the long run, let me just assure you. So now go out there and get some good medicine and give some good medicine.